Okay, so you are implying that we should have a very good policy and a set of actual projects around this topic of Internet of Things, because sensors is basically about Internet of Things. Okay, Yamal, from the perspective of polytechnics, can you add something on that? Since yesterday, we have all been talking about creating solutions for actual people who are having actual problems. So let's move from sensors to the next level. Let's assume that we manage to have sensors everywhere. Let's assume that we are actually measuring everything. What would be the concrete applications that would be extremely useful right now? So one actionable item would be to educate everyone on how powerful it is when data actually is being captured. And obviously, the value of capturing data is to derive knowledge out of it. My question, once again, what are the actual low-hanging fruits for Mauritius? What kind of applications we can build right now which would immediately benefit the population? And I'm asking this because I know that those solutions will be built, most probably by the private sector. And later I'm going to ask what kind of incentive government can give. Let's hear about the private sector, the business opportunity point of view first. Anyone? Okay. So this is actually a very important element. For those of you who don't know the Info Highway, it is the infrastructure which connects all ministries and departments. So what Sandeep is saying is that Info Highway should be open to every party, private sector or not, that there should be some kind of agreement on the kind of data which is being shared, some agreement on the format, and what do you think about having a consortium, having some kind of collaboration between government, private sector, civil society to manage Info Highway? Do you find this interesting? So Tishan from the MRIC, which has a big fund for innovation, what could you do to promote this opening of Info Highway towards all parties? Okay, rebounding on this, there was something that was mentioned during the previous roundtable on the need, actually, for our Mauritian companies and Mauritian government to foster meaningful relationships with companies, big companies from abroad, which have a lot of expertise and which could help us move quicker. So how can we create such an environment? Okay, anyone else want to add on this aspect? Yamal? Okay, so this is a very good transition towards the second question. The second question is about the cultural soft foundations, which is quite vague. But then here we'll touch upon maybe some of the things that I mentioned yesterday during my presentation. In addition to the hard skills, the scientific skills, the mathematical skills, people need to have leadership skills, the capability to work in groups, the capability to understand complex things, the capability to interact with people from abroad and speak the same language. So how can we make things happen? I'll take a concrete example. I have so many memories of IITs wanting to come to Mauritius, or Google exploring the opportunity to come here, or Facebook talking to some people in Mauritius. But many times, what happened was that there was a mismatch. What they were talking about and what we were talking about on our side were not the same thing. So what can we do, us as Mauritians, to make sure that the whole population is ready to move to the next level? Okay, so how do we instill those soft skills in a very short amount of time, but with the intention of it being the most effective possible? We do. So are you implying that a good way to change things in classes would be to have roundtables every day?
We do.
At the level of polytechnics?
We sit in peer-to-peer learning structure.
Does this happen in private companies? Do you actually allow people to go unscripted?
It depends on which companies you're talking about. I think Probably in the public sector, it's definitely not the case, probably.
But it happens from time to time. My office.
It would depend on the ministry.
So, just imagine, Raoul, for instance, that you become the boss of the Mauritius Digital Transformation Agency. What would you do to reach this target of completely changing the mindset, the way we do things?
Thank you, Avinash. Are you offering me the job?
I don't have this, this authority.
Thank you, thank you.
One thing which is interesting in private companies, especially companies in the telecom sector or in the technological sector, is that they understand what Steve Jobs was mentioning. You need to have the right to fail in order to succeed. And anyone who has been in business knows that you succeed only after seven steps. So, if we want to instill this in government, or in the minds of young people, I see a lot of young people today. What do we need to do? And I'm going to ask the young people themselves. So if there is a mic somewhere that you can pass to one of the young people there from university, I suppose. What would you like to, what would it take for you to become risk takers and trying and failing for 6 times until succeeding big?
Everyone, my name is Yadav Nandlal from University of Mauritius. One thing that maybe would encourage me as a student to take more risk is less emphasis on results, our CPA in the university, and more emphasis on the projects that we do, our final dissertation, the codes that we write, what type of technology do we know.
Okay, less emphasis on results. An extreme view of that is no exams at all. And you're judged only if you have managed to solve a real problem. Is that feasible? So what would be the contribution of the private sector in this kind of endeavor? Maybe Drishti has something to add. You will all agree that there's a social stigma. If you fail, your parents will tell you, go and find a job in government. If you fail once, they forget that Steve Jobs has failed hundreds of times before succeeding, or Bill Gates, or Linus Torvalds, or whatever. What can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen anymore? So, would it be possible, you think, to have experimentation labs in every single entity in Mauritius, in universities, in the government, in private sector? Is that a possibility? Okay. So let's say, for instance, there's one question from the audience. We'll take that one question, and then we'll move to the next topic. Yeah, this is an interesting question. Yesterday, I did mention that Mauritius is part of the African continent, that we are part of SADC COMESA, and this is a huge market for us to conquer. Let's move to the next question because it touches upon this. The next question is, it's very nice to talk about having building blocks, changing education, changing the way companies operate, having experimentation labs. How do we pay for those? How do we finance those? The gentleman was asking, how do we make sure that the young people of Mauritius train with public money, in most cases, stay here and work on solutions that are going to be used to bring in revenue for the country? How do we do that?
You were together with me on that panel where these youngsters came to present their project. What did you see in their face? Stamina, motivation, it's there. So I think we need to give them the opportunity.
Yeah, but once again, here we are talking about how do we finance those things. We all agree that there are a number of things that we can do to give an environment to people for them to be able to create new products and solutions. But Mauritius is a tiny country with limited resources. How can we strategically use the money which is available in government and in the private sector to make sure that the results are concrete and achievable, obviously? Okay, so what you're mentioning is that you believe that young people should focus on building solutions which are actually important, which, if done properly, would bring in, would have some value, and which would bring in some kind of revenue. How do we do that concretely? Because we are talking of thousands of young students, potentially thousands of projects. How can this happen? Let's continue talking a bit about the financing part. Once again, Mauritius is a tiny country. The budget is limited, especially in the post-COVID situation. We have all heard that 2021 is going to be quite difficult. So how do we strategically place our money for the maximum win? So you're referring to doing much more profound market research, and what I was alluding to this morning, design thinking, getting the user, the end user, involved in the development process.
Yes.
So how do we do that? And then I'll give you the mic. So how do we make sure that whatever we have invested can actually become something which is immediately sellable?
So this is what is important.
Okay, so would something like, I have two questions that I would like to put to the panelists and the audience as well. The very first one is, given that resources are limited, would something like crowdfunding be a possibility for us to finance interesting projects or young people? One thing. The second thing is at the level of legislations. Once a project gets promoted from the sandbox regime, there need to be some change in legislation to cater for whatever new requirement that project has. How can we make government more agile so that legislations can readily be changed, easily be changed?
How
But
about
some
yeah.
people would tell you, if they put their ideas online, someone else might copy the idea. What's your take on that? Or anyone else? The procurement process needs to be reviewed in some way or another to make sure that agility is part of, the government DNA in order to solve, actual problems. And coming back to this thing about, people saying, I won't tell you what idea I have, while someone else will copy it. I can tell you this as an entrepreneur. I ran my own company for 10 years. Everyone pretty much has the same ideas. The differentiating factor is execution. Everyone wakes up in the morning with the exact same idea. Every single entrepreneur would tell you this. But the energy that you need to have in order to make this idea a reality is what differentiates person A from person B. And what we want to achieve in the long run is to have a lot of people who pretty much have the same ideas, but who can actually deliver. Yeah, this is what has been happening for years now. When let's say you compose a song, it is copyrighted. You get the royalties when it is being played somewhere else. Anyone then can reinterpret the song, they won't get the royalties. So there are some mechanisms that exist to reward the person who has had the idea first. But protecting an idea does not serve any purpose because at the end of the day, it's the execution. This is a very interesting observation. Because of our political stability, because the kind of technological development level that Mauritius has reached, because of the level of the population, because of the place where we are situated, right in the middle of everything, Mauritius is extremely well regarded by a number of international organizations, be it government, even private companies. A lot of them would like to do concrete projects with us, Mauritians. But as you alluded, a lot of times things don't happen. And they're ready to put in money. I remember when I was a lecturer at the University of Mauritius, IIT from Kanpur, India, wanted to make something with the University of Mauritius, but this never happened. Why? And what can we do about it?
This is a big question. I mean, a lot of things don't happen, for many reasons. Politics generally, I'm not talking about party politics, but politics has a lot to do with it. We're a small country, but politics is a main sport. So,
Okay, so we need to evolve, make our whole ecosystem around the procurement process much more in line with what is happening in other countries, especially Singapore, Estonia, etc., etc. No, you're right about collaboration happening at the level of academics, because this has been happening over years and years and years, lecturers from various universities working together. I'm talking of something else, building things together. When Kanpur came in 2006 or something, they wanted to have an IIT here in Mauritius. This didn't happen. And for reasons alluded most probably by Rao. And this is a major gap in the way we need to address in order for the country to become better. So let's do a small survey among the young people from the university. Who'd like to work in Uber or Google if they set up here? None? Yeah. This is a very, very important consideration. A lot of what we call unicorns today, or even the small startups in the Silicon Valley, in Bangalore, or everywhere else, are being financed by venture capitalists. So there are some structures which already exist. Could we leverage on that in Mauritius? Drishti, from the point of view of EDB, how can we make our people or projects become visible to those who have money to invest? One thing, investors, this is good, but maybe there's another gap that we need to address as well. Until our workforce is upskilled and reskilled, or trained, in the case of young people, we need to have, in my opinion, many more foreigners, experts, willing to transfer their knowledge to us. How can we make this happen? Right. The world is built upon open source software now. We all know that. Anything which has some software there, except for some laptops which run Windows, everything else is powered by open source software. And I agree 100% with you, because as you all know, I'm the one who created the Linux user group 20 years ago. I'm an open source guy, and I'm very happy, for instance, in the Government Online Center to have open source pretty much everywhere. And this is true at Mauritius Telecom as well. My IT is open source, everything is open source. And open source actually is something extremely valuable because it allows us to derive solutions very easily. It allows us to educate our youth very easily because you already have something which is massive, which works. And I'm very happy that you have mentioned open source. I nearly forgot. Should have. So the very last question was about the need. You said there's no need, but I don't agree. Personally, I think that there's an opportunity here, like Singapore, in fact, to have much more foreigners working in Mauritius. Because, in my opinion, this will allow us to build products quicker, and most importantly, this will allow us to have much more knowledge transfer. So I would like to have your opinion on that, and then we'll conclude this session.
Thank you very much. Avinash, thank you very much. It was a very wide-reaching and good discussion. I didn't know how this one was going to go down, but I think we covered a lot of points.
So thank you very much. This was the concluding remark. We need more experts to help us move further. And let's have lunch now. Thank you to all panelists.